So risk management is like a structured steps that help us to make management for the risk that could affect one of the assets. We start by risk identification. So we start to list our assets or our system components, and then we start to discuss what are the different threats that could impact each one of these components. That happen during risk identification. And if you are not aware about different types of ransomware, malware, viruses, and different types of cyber attack, you will not be able to do proper risk identification. That's why it was very important to start with basics and teach you what is vulnerability and how hackers can take benefit of such vulnerability and exploit it. After doing risk identification, you start by doing a risk analysis. And in risk analysis, you start by evaluating what could be the impact of this particular attack. How much could we lose during or due to such risk if it happened? If I have a flood, a fire, a cyber attack, what could be the damage on my reputation? What could be the damage due to the stop of the system? How much would I lose? And after then, you evaluate this amount of losses to a predefined level called the risk acceptable level or acceptable level of risk or the risk appetite. So usually every business come with or any process come with a certain risk, but this risk could be acceptable until it reach a specific threshold. Once the risk exceeds the accepted threshold, this risk will be considered as an acceptable risk. And as a result, we should decide how to treat this risk. We can treat this risk by either implement a security control to prevent or mitigate this risk. We can treat this risk by simply accepting it, so we are free to lose 100 US dollar in case system was out. We are cool about that. So we can accept such risk, or we can avoid this risk by terminate the process that create or that bring this risk to our organization. Example for a process that could create a risk on our organization or that can, by its introduction, can affect our business in a bad way is, for example, internet service. I could decide to open internet connection and controlled internet connection to all my employees. But this could give or bring or introduce a risk such as users will browse unethical websites, they could introduce malware, and so on. So we evaluate, do we really need to open internet connection to all employees regardless of their position? If the answer is yes, so we will need to think about the risk that could happen during opening internet connection in uncontrolled manner, and we need to check about possible mitigation tools that we can use to filter the internet connection and prevent the malware that could come through this internet connection. And if the answer is no, this is not essential for business. So in this case, we can avoid this process by closing the internet on all employees, because at the end, the goal or this process does not comply with business requirements, or there is no strategic need to keep it up and running, and as it presents a lot of risk. The other option for risk treatment is to transfer, like outsourcing. If I have a risky activity that should be done by my employee, so in this case, I could transfer or outsource this activity to someone who is competent and has and have enough experience to do this activity 1 and 2 and 3 times without having the same level of risk. Okay. And for any risks that we either accept, avoid, or transfer, risk should be monitored on ongoing basis. Because for some type of risk, we may decide to accept it. Okay, the risk may make me lose like 100 US dollar. So this is acceptable level of risk. But maybe, and by the time, this risk could be related to my website, and I was a normal store or normal business that does not use internet in the marketing and contacting with customers. But by the time I will rely on the internet more and more. So if my website was down right now, I may lose only 100 US dollar, which is acceptable level. But what after 1 year or 2 years? Maybe I was in a process to adopt a digital transformation approach, and I will digitalize my operation, and I will count on the internet on my day-to-day activity. So in this case, the previously accepted risk after 1 year will not be accepted because the cost of this risk or the impact would exceed this value which were acceptable before. So in this case, it is very important to monitor the risk on ongoing basis to ensure that the previously accepted risk or the previous treatment decision is still relevant and still applicable to my business. So that's what we mean by the risk management process. We start by identifying assets, do assessment for the risk by identifying risks that could affect this asset in a bad way. We analyze this risk by identifying what could be the impact in terms of money or in terms of impact such high, medium, low. We evaluate if this level of risk is in the threshold that is accepted, and then we treat the risk. So I just give me 1 minute and we'll come back, okay? So that's what do we mean by the process of risk management overall. And risk management is not only something related to IT. It is something also could be related to financial team, could be related to physical security. It could be related by a lot of, uh, let's say, could be related to a lot of functions. So in information security, we do the risk management from the perspective uh, of the information security risk. But when we talk about physical security or when we talk about somehow a risk that could be related to financial, could be related to something else, each department should has a process because this process will be responsible in managing the risk that affecting this specific business unit or business function. So I hope it's somehow clear, and let's go to the next or this scenario. So assuming that you have this example or this scenario, let's see if we have or if we can answer this one. Or let me think about what could be your analysis or your answer for this particular scenario. So try to read this and try to give me an answer. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So let's read this question together. So this could be the loss value every time a successful attempt will happen, right? And from our experience, we have theft incident to this warehouse how many times per year? So yeah, because we have already, it is successful already. Okay? Yeah. Okay, I may have a grammar mistake here, but I wrote this question by myself, by the way, so that's why it may be mistake in case of grammar, but let me tell you what I do understand. You have a warehouse in rural area. Some valuable items are being lost every year. Multiple theft attempts has been reported. Some of it were successful. So I believe we need to add full stop here. Every time successful theft happens, around 30,000 equal dollar of goods is lost. And safety incidents happens around 8 times a year. So I got your option here. I got your what you are talking about. I need to have here a successful incident happens, which could be 3,000 multiplied by 8, which in this case the cost will be 240,000 US dollar, right? And we have an option, or we got like an offer to provide a security service that will cost us like 100,000 per a year. So assuming that I have 8 successful uh, attempt happen every year, so in this case the cost of the solution or control will exceed the value of loss. So in this case I will spare like 106,000 of goods by implementing this security solution somehow, in case theft happens once again. So in this case, I would accept the solution. But of course, if the total lost value every year was like 30,000, and at the end, I will don't have, in this case, the cost of the security control will exceed the value of the asset or what we are trying to protect at the first place. So to answer similar questions, and this is purely related to risk management, we have different terms in relation to risk management. We have what is called the single loss expectancy, and this is the value of what we can lose every time we can be subject to such incident. So expectancy. And we have also the ARO, which indicates the annual rate of occurrence. So to calculate what would be the annual loss expectancy, it will be the SLE multiplied by the ARO. It is purely a security basics, so you are not maybe required to memorize these answers, however, or this question or equations. However, it is somehow makes sense. So based on that, you can calculate how much you could lose in compared to a security control that be in place. So you can choose the control cost based on that. But unfortunately, not all type of risk can be quantified. For example, we cannot quantify what could be the impact of data leakage on my company reputation, or what could be the impact of leaking the trade secret on the continuity of my business or making revenue. Like I have like a trade secret for how to make some technology or something, and this got leaked to the public audience. So anybody can take this rights or can take this formula and start to do the same product and compete me in the market. So we cannot assess this in a money term. So that's why in risk assessment, there are some kind of risk that can be quantitatively analyzed using the equations that we just described, like loss in inventory, loss in hardware, and something like this could be tangible and can be quantified in terms of money. But some other elements or some other risk or some other impact cannot be, let's say, quantitatively analyzed or gathered. In this case, we need to approach in a qualitative risk assessment. Qualitative risk assessment does not use money to indicate the level or the impact of risk, but it could reflect or use a term such as low, medium, and high. So this, for example, could pose a high impact on my organization. This could pose low impact, and this could pose a medium impact. Okay. So this is an example for how risk assessment happens from IT perspective. We do risk assessment to identify what are the possible risks that could impact our system. So assuming that you are doing a web or risk assessment to your website or your web application. So in risk identification, you try to identify the predictable or let's say possible risk events, such as we could have could be subject to denial of service attack. This is an example for risky scenario. We try to assess what could be the cause of such thing because we have single point of failure. We have low bandwidth capacity. We have low server equipment capacity and all of this stuff. Or our website is not designed to absorb too many requests. What could be the effect of something like the denial of service? It could lead to loss in availability, right? What is the probability for being subject to denial of service? It could be related to Black Friday offers. We are e-commerce website and we could be subject to multiple or huge quantity of transactions at the same or at specific durations during the year. So the probability will be medium, and the impact if that happened will be very high because we will lose availability, so we will lose a lot of transactions and a lot of revenue that could be possible if the system was up and running. Based on these two factors, we can try to measure how much our risk is. So assuming that this is like an axis, like a horizontal and vertical axis, this vertical axis is for probability. So if you have a medium risk, this could indicate the value of 5. Can you see it? And if you have very high impact, this could, as per the vertical axis or horizontal axis, could be indicate 9. So in this case, the level of this particular risk is 5 by 9, which result in what? 45. And this could be a high risk, and you need to decide or suggest how to respond. So you could suggest to move to a cloud service provider that provide internet infrastructure as a service, and who will be responsible to assess this and check the applicability of such solution would be the network team lead or the network management team. You try to assess all the risk could be related to your infrastructure. From your perspective, you can assess the risk that could be related to ransomware. What could happen if ransomware happens? The probability could be low or medium. Impact could be very high. So this is a very high risk. How to mitigate? We should purchase a sandbox, make a process for daily backup for end users' devices, ask users to upload their sensitive data to a file share drive, such as Z drive, which is a mapped network drive. And we as IT take a backup from this drive every day. So in case of ransomware attack happens, your valuable data or your business or sensitive documents will be backed up already. So that's how risk assessment works. Risk analysis, as I mentioned, can be qualitative, that's based on high, medium, and low, can be semi-quantitative, which is like the way that we were discussing right now. This assessment method is called semi-quantitative because it is not quantitative purely because it does not generate the value in money, but it generates value in a quantitative form that can help you in representing it in a heat map or in a graph or in something like this to make like a classification or sorting for the different level of risk, because you might have a lot of type of risks that are categorized as high, but which one of these two kind of risk that is higher? The one that has that have value of 81. Quantitative is purely about representing the risk in amount of dollars or pounds and so on. So this is the different kinds of risk that we can accept. We can have a low impact risk with low probability. We can have a high impact risk but with low probability. We could have a high probability of risk but with high impact, and we can have high probability of risk but with low impact. And depend of every one of this type of risk, we can select the proper treatment method. So for the risk with low probability and low impact, we can choose to accept. For risk with low impact, but with high probability we could choose to mitigate, and so on.